Today, he has elected to write an article apologising for falling for post office lies, but pledging that he won't be silent as Tories prey on victims' trauma. And Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats and MP for Kingston and Surbiton, joins me now.
Good morning, James.
What precisely are you apologising for?
Well, when I was Post Office Minister, 11 days in, I sent a letter to Alan Bates saying I didn't want to meet him because government owned the Post Office, didn't run it. That obviously annoyed him, quite understandably, and it took me 5 months to meet him. I wish I'd met him earlier. And I'm particularly apologising because when I listened to him, a very reasonable man, and his concerns, particularly about Horizon computer system, and I put his concerns to the Post Office, I didn't uncover their lies. And their lies were really quite profound, particularly on the Horizon computer system. What worried Mr. Bates was that the sub-postmaster they were told the sub-postmaster was the only person who could enter their budget, their financial system on the computer. And there was no possibility of remote access. And Mr. Bates was questioning that. And so I questioned the Post Office on that and said, look, is there remote access? Are there any bugs in the system? Is it robust? And I was told categorically that it had been independently assured there was no remote access. Now, we subsequently learn, years later, that was a complete and utter lie, and they knew it. There was a report from Ernst & Young in 2011, while I was the minister, that the Post Office received saying there was remote access. So they lied to me. And what I'm apologising for is not seeing through those lies. The Post Office kept lying to other ministers, to the judges, to courts, and that lie was only finally exposed when an insider from Fujitsu blew the whistle, and we had a BBC panorama in August 2015, then we had the High Court in 2019. But I feel I should apologise for not seeing through those lies, though I have to say it would have been pretty tough.
Of course, and yet it's now the 1st of February 2024, and you've referred back to various milestones in this saga at which that apology probably became necessary, or at least desirable, the latest of which would probably be the 1st of January, when Mr. Bates versus the Post Office began to be broadcast on ITV to extraordinary effect, as I think everybody knows. So why has it taken you so long?
Well, the story is horrendous. I watched the ITV drama, and you can't be anything other but distressed for the hundreds, maybe thousands of postmasters who were affected. And I said very early on that I regretted it. I probably should have said much earlier. Accept that. I should have said sorry earlier.
Why didn't you?
Well, I felt it, and I don't know why. I just probably should have said it. I was saying regret, and I felt that was getting over that point. But I probably should have said sorry earlier.
What happened here in this interview earlier this month, last month?
I was lied to.
Why not draw a line under it then and just apologise? Can you apologise to sub-postmasters?
Of course, I regret.
That's not an apology.
Well, I've said of course. I think it really is.
Well, why don't you say I am sorry?
Well, I've said time and time again that I deeply regret.
That's not I am sorry.
That I was lied to.
That's not an apology.
I was lied to on an industrial scale.
Why can't you say sorry?
Well, of course, I feel that I'm right to express regret for not getting to the bottom.
Why can't you say sorry? It's the least they deserve. Look what they've been through. Just say sorry for your part in not having got to the answers.
My heart goes out to the hundreds of people.
Not enough to say sorry.
Hit, and I deeply regret that we didn't get to the bottom of the lies that were told.
Paul Brand at ITV there, giving you the third degree, and today you are saying sorry. So
I probably should have said sorry to Paul Brand. I really, and I regret not saying sorry. Yeah. And if I gave
it's a lot of regret.
Yeah. Well, if I gave the impression that I didn't feel deeply sorry for the hundreds of families who suffered, sorry for me not meeting Alan Bates earlier and not seeing through the lies, of course I should say sorry for that.
And have you been in touch with Alan Bates since the drama unfolded?
Yeah, I've contacted him, waiting to hear back, but he's incredibly busy and in demand, obviously.
He certainly is. I ran through the list of ministers who had held the position that you held, and all of whom would have had responsibility for this as the story developed. Indeed, many of them would have been in the chair. Why do you think your head is much further above the parapet on all of these issues than anybody else who has held the same role during the relevant period?
Well, this was a very long one. I think it's even longer because Horizon came in 1999. I
think I've just done a sum. I think you had the job for 19 months.
Yeah, 90 months out of that 20 years. Yeah, that's right. The Tory press, I think, well, the Tory party, its election year, I think they're trying to get a scapegoat. They talked about blaming it on Tony Blair. They tried to blame Keir Starmer. They're trying to blame me, and I think they're trying to blame others. And you do sometimes see this with particularly their friends in the Tory media, that they try and find scapegoats and try and distract people. And they're distracting them from the Conservative Party's appalling record in government, aren't they? I mean, I think this is the most shocking government I've ever witnessed. I'm determined to lead the Liberal Democrats to beat lots of Conservative MPs. And you can see the Conservative Party clearly see as a threat. That's why they're attacking us.
What do you mean when you say you won't be silent as the Tories prey on victims' trauma?
Well, when you're weaponising something like this, which is a tragedy, I mean, we should actually have the forefront of our minds the hundreds of sub-postmasters who need to be quickly and properly compensated. They've already waited far too long. They should be fully exonerated, and they should get the truth from the public inquiry, which I've supported, and the Metropolitan Police criminal investigation. And for the Conservatives to put this into a sort of political weapon, I think is just... It's unfair to the postmasters. Why aren't they focusing in on getting that compensation? We saw, I think it was on the front page of the Telegraph today, Alan Bates is expressing real horror that the government isn't coming up with a proper compensation package even now. So, I see it as my job, I'm sure other people do, to fight for the sub-postmaster for that conversation. And you heard lots of Conservative ministers and MPs jumping up and down about this, but I don't know if they've gone onto the airways today to back up Alan Bates. They certainly ought to be.
Describing the settlement he's been offered as derisory and cruel. Most people listening, Ed Davey, will have watched the drama, or most people who have watched the drama and who are listening today will struggle with the scepticism. I understand that you say that. Well, I understand that you were lied to. That's a matter of record, and thanks to the work of journalists like Nick Wallace in bringing whistleblowers forward, that is now a matter of record, not a matter of opinion. But the weight of evidence, the fact that you had to essentially decide that hundreds of sub-postmasters, previously blameless pillars of their respective communities, were all coincidentally defrauding the post office all stealing from the post office at the same time. Do you never get even the vaguest whiff of rat during this period?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the numbers that I was told were much smaller. I mean, Alan Bates was representing about 100. And when I put those sorts of questions to the post office, they didn't tell me about this huge number they were prosecuting. What was really interesting when you watch the drama, remember that scene in that community hall when they all said that the post office said they were the only one with problems, and then there was everyone who wasn't the only one according to the post office. And that was the way they treated their advice on how many of us were being affected by this.
But 100's still a big number.
It is a big number, and that's why I took his concerns really seriously and asked serious questions. And not only did they give me the assurances about that the Horizon system was robust and had been independently assured, they said, look, these people have gone to court. Some people have pleaded guilty. Judges have found them guilty. Are you wanting to overturn the judges minister? So, that was the sort of situation you were
This
in.
would be your civil servant saying that to you?
Yeah, I think on behalf of the post office, I'm not blaming officials. I think the blame lies fully and squarely on the post office.
Are you going to name any names? Who lied to you?
Well, the sort of people in charge of the post office at this time was, first of all, a guy called David Smith and then Paula Venables. They will have had other people in their team. And one of the reasons I was so keen to champion a public inquiry after the High Court case in 2019, when we got the full exoneration of at least Alan Bates's group, was because I do think we need that public inquiry to get to the truth. I'm delighted the Metropolitan Police have opened a criminal investigation. I want to give evidence to that inquiry. I believe I'm going to be called. And it's essential because I think when you think about the sub-postmasters, and let's remember, they should be the top of mind. They have had horrendous experience, horrendous. Some people committed suicide. People lost their businesses, their houses. Some people's marriages were broken up. I mean, I have 2 sub-postmasters in my own constituency. One went to prison for 16 months for something he did not do. They should be the right to the front of our mind, getting that compensation, fair and generous and quick, getting them exonerated so they can hold their heads up high as I think they should now, but they need that publicly said, and then they need to deserve the truth. And they deserve system change, by the way. One of the things I wrote in my article today was I think this shows that the system is rotten on so many levels, not just the way the right-wing press and the Tory party are weaponising, that's part of it, but the fact that you have these arm-length bodies like the Post Office where ministers don't have day-to-day control at all. And that model, I think, is broken. And I think how the system responds to crises and scandals is broken. The laws around whistleblowers, for example. As I said earlier, the whistleblower was core to finding the truth in this. But our laws around whistleblowers are pathetic. They're way behind other countries. We need to give much more support to people who are prepared to blow the whistle and say there's a scandal happening here, and give them real protection so that they're not in any way disadvantaged by telling the truth.
Have you been in touch with Paula Venables at all since the programme was aired, or since?
No.
When did you last speak to her?
Oh, I think when I was a minister.
Right. And those are the only 2 names that you're putting into the names that are already in the public sphere, David Smith and Paula Venables, because the phrase you use repeatedly is we were reassured time and again that the Horizon system wasn't working. What was the nature of these reassurances, and who was giving them to you personally or your
when I
people?
Very occasionally met the Post Office people, but primarily I went through the officials. That's how you do it. And after the meeting with Alan Bates, I asked officials, and then of course I followed up with the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, who clearly and understandably not liked by Alan Bates and the Sub-Postmasters, because they went to their, like a trade union, the National Federation, and they didn't help them. But I didn't know that, so I went to what I considered to be the trade union for Sub-Postmasters, the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters. I said, is it true? I've had this case, I've seen Alan Bates. What do you think about it? And they backed up the Post Office line.
Nick Wallace reserves particular disdain for the ombudsman, for the Federation of Sub Postmasters, and it would be interesting to see what any public inquiry does regarding their role, as indeed it will one of your successors in the position and one of your predecessors as leader of the Liberal Democrats, Joe Swinson. The forensic accountant's second sight were dismissed by the Post Office under her watch. Should she be in the studio next after you, do you think? Does she have questions to ask?
I think Jo will speak for herself, but I'm absolutely sure she was lied to, as I was, and ministers of all political parties, right? Unlike the Conservatives, I'm not trying to weaponise this. I think Labour ministers before me would have been lied to, Jo, and Conservatives afterwards. One thing I would say about Conservative ministers, which I think they had the benefit of the Panorama programme in August 2015, when John Sweeney, the BBC team, with a Fujitsu Inside whistleblower, exposed this lie about remote access. They had the benefit of the High Court judgment in 2019. So, that wasn't available to Liberal Democrat or Labour ministers. And that was really the critical thing that Alan Bates and others had raised, and it comes out in the documentary.
Finally, are you fighting for your political life at the moment?
No. I mean, what's been really so encouraging is the way the party has responded to this. Really, they've seen it for what it is. They've seen the Conservative Party trying to weaponise this as a weapon. They've seen the Conservative Party pretty worried about the Liberal Democrats, actually, because there are many, many seats where we can beat the Conservative MPs and help change this awful government.
So, Ed Davey, thank you, leader of the Liberal Democrats and MP for Kingston and Surbiton.